Today we have Mia. Mia's going to share a little bit about her experience transitioning into UX design. And this episode's a little bit different, and I'm excited for Mia to kind of dive deeper into that. Do you want to share a little bit about what you were doing before you even knew what UX design was?
Sure. So before I started, I had got my bachelor's degree in geoscience, and I specialized in kind of like the atmospheric science area. And then I got a job as a geologist that I worked in for 5 years, and that mostly pushed towards like the design side. So I was working a lot of oil and gas jobs, a lot of pipeline jobs, a lot of renewable energy projects that I was designing for. But it was obviously a different designing than UX. It was kind of more, like CAD, 3D, all that good stuff. But yeah, that's kind of where I started. And I worked that job for 5 years. And then I got to a place where I was doing a lot. I was basically living in my car. I was doing so much traveling. I even had like one of those coolers that you plug into your car outlet because I needed to keep things cool all day because I was just driving nonstop. And then when I wasn't driving, I was designing. Um, so yeah, that kind of like started pushing me to the direction of like, I cannot do this long term. This is crazy. I can't live like this for much longer. And then, something crazy happened when COVID hit, and a lot of people in the company started to get laid off, which kind of it pushed me back into a lot of projects stopped, only essential workers were allowed out. So that kind of pushed me back into being in the office and doing a lot more designing. And then also getting the opportunity to wear more hats because we had less people. So they were kind of like, hey, we have this opening. It was actually for our like diversity and inclusion committee. And they're like, we have this opportunity. We lost our communications person who really did like all the content design. We know you do, engineering stuff, but you want to hop over and help with this. So that kind of opened my eyes to like, oh, okay, I have some skills that can translate into something more creative instead of, black and white engineering design, basically. So yeah, that's really where the idea got started. And then, your phone listens to you all the time.
Right.
So then, I was on TikTok and I started getting TikToks of Carla from Avocademy in the big avocado outfit. So that's really honestly like the first introduction I had to it was seeing her basically in an avocado costume running around.
Cool.
Um,
She's gonna love to hear that. Did
yeah.
you is that when you started kind of putting together that like, oh, okay, so I've kind of acknowledged that I have these skills, I can do something
Yes,
different than what I'm currently doing, and now there's a
right.
name for it, right? It's like UX design or UI design or
Yeah, I was definitely in a place where I was getting really burnt out. And even with COVID, when I stopped being, having to drive so much, I was still in a place where we had less people. So I was picking up the slack in that sense. So I was just burned out and I was ready for something different.
right.
So yeah, I think that's how I got onto the UX train in the first place. I didn't do like a lot of backhand research before. I just knew I was doing this sort of thing, and then, like I said, Carla was running around in an avocado
Yeah.
costume, and kind of put a name to what I was doing.
Yeah. That's cool. So, anytime you're like learning a new skill, there's like different ways you can learn it.
Yeah,
Um, so did you consider other ways of learning other than doing like a boot camp or a course? Or were you just like, hey, I need to learn this so that I can be better at this new job that I have? Or was your
yeah.
goal like, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna quit that job? Like, what was kind of the train of thought?
So yeah, I kind of already had a taste of it from the job I was doing. I wasn't doing, full UX or anything like that, but I was doing, like a lot of content, um, content creation, that kind of thing. And then, helping splice up the website. So that kind of stuff. And then wait, hold on. I forgot the question. What were we talking
Um,
about?
yeah. So did you did you decide? How did you decide to like go
Oh,
and
right.
start like the Avocademy program? Like, were
Yeah,
you like, I'm gonna do a boot camp for sure, so I can change for like completely change careers,
right.
or were you just like, I need to learn some additional skills? Like, what did that look like?
Right. So, yeah, I have too much student loans to be able to stop working and, just start doing another degree full time. All I can think in my head was, I am just going into like more and more debt if I do this.
Yeah,
So I definitely knew I was going to go the boot camp route. It was just kind of a matter of then narrowing down which one I thought would be best. Um, so yeah, that's how I kind of got into that. I considered it for like a half second, getting like a master's degree in UX. And then I was like, I literally can't afford this. Like, this is not going to work.
yeah,
Um, I was like living by myself and, the rent was getting more expensive and my student loans were cranking up because I was out of school for so long. So yeah, it wasn't really an option for me to do a master's degree.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Education can be so expensive.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I get that. So you did our programs. Walk us through, high level, like what that experience was like, and maybe what you learned and where you're at now. Yeah, I mean, I know
Yeah,
that's a lot, but maybe walk us through like
sure.
what that looked like.
So I started the first part, the foundations. I think, um, God, I think it was mid 2020. I'm not 100% sure. Might have been a little bit after that, maybe like September or something. But yeah, I knew that I needed to do something. And then there's also this thing looming in the back of my head that my partner he was in medical school. So like I knew that he was going to be bouncing around. And I knew that a lot of the skills I had in the geoscience realm were specific to the state I was living in. So I was living in Pennsylvania. All the rules and regulations, all the OSHA stuff was everything in my head was for Pennsylvania. So I was like, if we leave the state, I'm screwed. Like
Yeah,
I'm going to have no skills that can be applied, or not as many that could be applied if I stayed in the place I was in. So yeah, I definitely jumped on that, and I wanted to get ahead of the game. I knew I had about a year before those kinds of decisions would have to be made, and he would have to start moving around. So I started Avocademy, and I did foundations and career jumpstart back to back. The foundations, I did not like the research as much as I thought I was going to. And then we started getting to jumping into more skills that were like transferable to me. So like the wireframing and the hi-fi screens. And I think that really was like, okay, I like didn't know about this, and I was used to doing the more brand content stuff. But that was the point where I was like, okay, this could really be a possibility and I could be really good at this. So yeah, that's what kind of was like the turning point for me. Like I was like gung ho. I was like, okay, we are going forward with
yeah,
this,
we're
and we're not
doing
going
this.
to stop this way. Um, and one thing I actually like about myself is that once I get something in my head and like I decide I'm going to stick to it, I just like power through it, no matter if I end up using it or not. Like I started this, I'm going to finish it. So yeah, I did that. I went through. I think it took me about probably a little longer than the 8 weeks. I think maybe it took me 4 months instead of like the 2 months, just because I was doing it part time and trying to squeeze in the time after my job. But yeah, after that, I jumped right into Career Jumpstart. Um, and that I feel like I learned so much so quickly. Like you learn the foundations in the foundations course, obviously, but then Career Jumpstart, it's just like the interacting with people, the interacting with clients, the managing things as a team and learning how to work in a team setting. I thought that experience was like invaluable. It was so important. um, so yeah, I think that's where I probably learned the most stuff
Yeah,
in that regard. But yeah, I guess after that we kind of got the news like, oh, wouldn't it I'm applying to all these programs. Wouldn't it be crazy if like we got Barbados? Haha, that would be hilarious. And then, it kind of happened. And we were in a place where we were like, I just learned all these new skills. I graduated from Career Jumpstart. I knew that like most remote jobs, even if I wanted to travel around the US, you had to be based in the US to do. So I was like, literally, what am I going to do? So yeah, I kind of decided that even though I was a new designer and it was going to be hard, that I was going to try to jump right into doing the freelance thing, which I did. But I had to learn like a couple tips and tricks kind of along the way. So yeah, go ahead.
How long have you been freelancing now? So how long has that been?
It's been about almost 2 years. So
Nice.
Yeah, I think so.
What?
But yeah, it's been almost 2 years, and like I said, it's not super recommended as a brand new designer to just like jump out there and do things. And looking back, I definitely like did some in the beginning, did some things for clients that I look back out now and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? But yeah, I think it's gotten significantly better since then. I hope so anyway. I mean, I keep getting hired, so I think so.
What do your freelance gigs look like? Just for people listening that are trying to understand, like, are you working a couple month jobs? Are you like selling websites to small businesses? Like, what does your freelance kind of work look like?
So I figured out that I loved the climate space and I wanted to stay there. And it's kind of like a niche industry to be in, I guess, which I didn't realize at the time. So I started really targeting the small climate job boards. So like there's one that's like Terra.do and Climate Base, a couple more, Digital Nomad Worlds. That's not really climate, but just one that I've used before. But yeah, I started targeting the smaller job boards because I found out that startups like to help other startups. So all of the freelance work that I've done has been with startups. And it's actually the coolest thing because when startups bring you on, it's because they don't have somebody who has that skill set. So you have the opportunity to teach people more than like I thought I was going to. So yeah, it's been really cool to do that and have the opportunity to work with so many different startups, whether they're in like the climate space or not. So yeah, that's been really, really cool. But yeah, I targeted, the smaller job boards and have worked primarily with startups on short-term contracts on a part-time basis, or even after contracts have ended, they reach back out to me a few months later and say, hey, we have one more thing we need to do. Can we contract you for just like 10 hours? Can you revise this or whatever it is? So yeah, that's been really cool. And it's been really interesting to be able to build relationships with, like a few different startups. And that's kind of how it's worked out so far.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congrats. And those relationships are like forever. I did some freelance work. I would say 6 years ago now. And that founder for startup, and that founder actually just reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and we just got one of our CJ students hired into that company for a contract because he was like, I know you're probably not doing freelance work anymore given your LinkedIn updates, but do you know anyone? And it was, to me, it was like, wow, like that one small freelance project that I did years ago, like he thought I need a UX designer and I was the first person that like came to mind, So
yeah,
that's great. I think, these relationships that you're building are just gonna like, eventually you'll have so much work that you'll be like, no, stop messaging me.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's been really crazy because I've also had the opportunity to work when I want to and not work when I don't want to.
Yeah.
When I just want to enjoy the island or travel to a different place, like I've been able to do that and kind of manage my own schedule, which is night and day from my previous job where I was getting calls at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night asking for me to do things. So yeah, it's been a pretty crazy. My anxiety level has gone down a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. What would you say was like, the most difficult thing that you had to learn in terms of freelancing, right? When
Yeah,
folks ask us about freelancing, we don't encourage it because of the fact that you have to not only like be super confident in your brand new design skills, but you also need to know how to pitch yourself, how to sell, how to invoice, how to
right.
bill, how to collect, right? And then how to
Yes.
market yourself, right? And then it's like it's running a business essentially, right?
Yeah,
Delivering is a very small part of that.
right.
So what from that like side of things, what was like the hardest thing that you had to like figure out?
Yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve. I'm not gonna lie. I spent like a lot of hours and time researching, especially how to like the tax stuff. And I was like, okay, I have to find my own insurance because it's not just given to you anymore. And then it's like, okay, well, I was contributing to a retirement account, but I never looked at it or saw it. So what do I do now? I have to do that myself. So I think it was like a lot of the things that are taken care of you in a traditional, taken care of for you in a traditional sense with a traditional job. You have to do that stuff all on your own now as a business owner. So yeah, that was a big transition for me, especially like I said with the taxes stuff and figuring out what needs to be taken out. Like, how do I start a retirement fund if I'm not working for a company? What do I do about health insurance?
Yeah.
So I think that it wasn't really the UX part that was the biggest hurdle for me. It was kind of like the UX stuff was easier compared to all of this background stuff of essentially running your own business.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that that was the hardest stuff. Um, in like, I guess for the UX part of it, one of the hardest things for me to overcome was managing my own schedule, because when you don't have to work a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4, it's kind of like, oh, well, I guess I could stop and go get a pizza, and then it turns into doing something else, and then you've been at the mall for 3 hours, and then you come back and you're working till midnight because you didn't manage your schedule well enough. So yeah, in the beginning, I definitely think it was that, and just trying to get in the mindset of, okay, you still have a job, even though nobody is holding you accountable in the same sense that they were. Yeah, that was the time thing was a big thing to get adjusted to, but I think I got over it pretty quickly. It maybe took like 6 weeks of me really sitting down and saying like, okay, set an alarm, like you are working for the next 4 hours.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think that was probably the biggest hurdles I've experienced in that sense.
Nice. Before we wrap up, what would be your one piece of advice for folks listening that want the outcome that kind of you landed on, which is this like freelancing, digital nomad,
Yeah.
flexibility type, lifestyle?
The biggest advice I would have is that, um, oh gosh, I guess that like no matter what you have done before this, you always have skills that you could bring to the table that, you don't think are necessarily UX related, but they end up being totally something important. Like I was talking about before, how I really wanted to get into the climate space because I had so much experience in renewable energies and that kind of stuff. And I thought that was going to be something that I had to leave behind. But it when companies who are also in that space, even though you're not doing the same job, when they know that you're knowledgeable about it and that you can contribute more to than just being a UX designer, like you're able to wear multiple hats even for them, and talk things through with them and have a back and forth about things they're working on that aren't UX related, I think that it's super helpful. So I would say don't ever discount the skills that you have that you don't think are transferable, because they 100% can be. I guess the other thing I would think about is that it's not like the easiest thing to get started, especially if you're a new designer. Like I said, it's a really steep learning curve, but once you're willing to do that, it's worth it. And also, I guess one more thing, I keep adding things on,
No,
but
this is great. Yeah.
I would say that you're not going to get out and make $70 or $85,000 a year. It's just not going to happen. You have to build a clientele. You have to build relationships with people, and you have to be okay with that being your starting point, and be okay with, okay, I only made $40,000 this year, but next year I'm hoping to make 60. You know what I mean? So you have to be okay with that being your starting point, and it's kind of sacrificing the freedom for the pay, I would say. Like, you have a ton more freedom, but you don't start out. You're not going to start out. I have never met one person who did start out just making a ton of money. Like, you have to work and build that up yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. When you do freelance, once you've had a couple years of experience, right, 3, 4,
Right.
5, you can jump into a month-long contract at, I've gotten paid crazy rates for freelance work once I
Yeah.
had experience, like 150, 175 an hour. Then yeah, you can work for a month and make this crazy amount of money and like have the flexibility and have the pay. But especially when you're first starting out, I think having realistic expectations like you're talking about, and knowing that you're going to be balancing this like freedom and like time freedom,
Yeah.
for the sake of maybe not making 80K a year or 100K a year. Where in that job you might have to like show up to an office every day for like
Right.
50 hours a week, and like live in one certain place, and all of that. So I love that you're sharing that, because I think it's really important for people to just have a realistic expectation of what this
Yeah,
this looks like.
for sure.
But awesome. Thank you, Mia, so much for sharing your story. Really kind of proud and happy of where you're at. I wish you the most success. But yeah, thank you.